others. So starting with Dr. Muhammad.
I'm so glad you raised this issue. We talk about global value change, be part of the trading system, but the prerequisite matters. The prerequisite is that trade must be fair. Trade currently is not fair. I'll give one example. Malaysia and Indonesia produce a lot of palm oil. Now, we cannot export to Europe. They want to protect their own industries. They acted discriminatively towards our own products. We have huge downstream. A lot of people depended on palm oil. But they said, you cannot export. We want to participate in global value change. Europe say no. And this is not the first time certain countries use discriminative behavior against weaker countries. Before, in Malaysia also, the natives want to switch from paddy, which is low yield, to rubber, high yield. The British say no, because they control rubber in Malaysia until we took over. Even in India, they produce, the women are quite good in waving the, how do you call it, the yarn, using their thumb, better than the one in England, in Newcastle or whatever the place. What the British did, cut the thumb of the woman in India. They literally cut the thumb. Discriminative behavior. How do you ensure trade is fair? That's where regional groupings matters, such as this. But data shows we don't trade among each other. We rather trade with others. So the prerequisite for global value chain to be a productive member of global trading system, the system must be fair. The system is currently not fair and nobody open their mouth. That's number one. Number two, I want to go back to the issue, maybe this is the last time I'm going to speak, before time is running out. I think it's important to say this. We heard about Gabon producing, I cannot pronounce the product they're producing. For the electric manganese. It reminds me of Botswana. Botswana is the largest producer of diamond in the world. Yet 50% of the rural in Ghana, in Botswana, live in poverty. How do you ensure the products that you have benefit society, benefit the country? Inclusive policy matters. I'm not saying that Malaysia is great, but we did a lot of wrong things, but we did a few things right. In 1971, we initiated a new policy, new economic policy. Two objectives. One, reduce poverty from 50% to 17%. Now poverty less than 1%. Second, restructuring of society, which means no one should be left behind. SDG just started a few years ago. We started in 1971. Especially, inclusive growth matters, especially for countries that are multi-ethnic, multiracial, and multicultural, which is Malaysia. We have Indian, Chinese, and Malays. Over lunch, you get a problem. Malay doesn't food non-halal, cannot eat non-halal. Indian cannot eat meat. Chinese can eat everything. It's going to be difficult. But we manage because we realize, and that's how it explains how we managed to move up. Political and social stability matters. This only can be achieved if everyone benefited, which means terms like affirmative actions must be deployed. But it cannot be deployed permanently. It must be deployed effectively and with certain constraint, which we did. During independence, the poorest group were the majority compared to other countries. Not far off. There's only two countries that have this experience, Malaysia and South Africa. The majority are the poorest. So we initiate policies. How do you ensure growth is inclusive? If you don't address this, you're never going to become prosper. That's my answer.
So I would say that I have a fairly brief answer, but with protectionism is not really a new topic, and has been the fourth area that I talked about was in the GVC framework that we look at. I said standards, but what it really we call it is institutions. So beyond, standards are just popular now, but a big part of it is looking at trade agreements and non-tariff barriers that have been set up over time in order to different countries for and against other industries. So my background and how I came into this was actually studying the textile industry, which has historically been one of the most protected industries starting in the 1950s and still is today. And it started with the US and the EU and has moved, and it ranges from cotton all the way to yarn forward trade agreements to fabric provisions to cut and sew apparel. And apparel still has one of the highest tariffs, as it's about 12% on final trade goods. So it plays a big role in which countries participate. And the makeup of the countries that you see today actually has a lot of historical precedents in countries that had quotas and countries that did not have quotas. So and then with current, and with the anything new that comes up, what you saw is that companies are resilient to this. They've always known that there are going to be trade disputes that come up, and they find ways to circumnavigate that by setting up